So good afternoon. I'm Kim Rule, and it's my privilege to welcome you to the third annual David K. Backus Memorial Lecture at NYU Stern School of Business, and to introduce our distinguished speaker, Professor Timothy Kehoe. I'm extremely fortunate to have had two great economists as mentors. As a young professor at Stern, Dave Backus helped me figure out what it meant to be a professional economist and how to navigate the obstacles that life and our employers put in front of us. And it wasn't just me. Dave helped hundreds of students and young economists find their way. His influence is felt the world over. In graduate school, Tim Kehoe shared his time and wisdom with a very young version of me and put me on the path to who I would later become. Tim is also a prolific advisor and mentor, and it's no accident that Tim and Dave were such close friends. Tim is here today to share his thoughts with us in honor of our friend Dave. Tim holds a PhD from Yale University, where he met and studied with Dave, roommates, I believe. After positions at MIT and Cambridge, Tim joined the University of Minnesota, where he is currently the distinguished McKnight University professor. Tim is a fellow of the Econometric Society and the Society for the Advancement of Economic Theory. Tim and his co-authors have written foundational papers in general equilibrium theory, the theory that forms the foundation for all of modern macroeconomic models. And his seminal work on the theory of sovereign debt has shaped our understanding of self-fulfilling debt crises and default. Tim is one of the giants upon whose shoulders so many of us have stood. Now, this might make it sound like Tim's some sort of ivory tower academic. That's not true. Much of what Tim has done is focused on the tough choices policymakers have to make every day. Tim's advised governments and central banks all over the world, including in the early 1990s, Tim served as a special economic advisor to the Mexican government during the NAFTA negotiations. Not the renegotiations, though, I guess. Okay. Good. Tim is currently working on a project joint with researchers at Stony Brook and Harvard University that studies the impacts of an aging population on Medicare and Medicaid. How will taxes have to change to finance the growing share of elderly people in the United States? What will those tax rates do for labor supply? What impact will they have on saving and investment? How will they affect different high-income versus low-income households? How will it affect people with college degrees versus people without college degrees? The enormity of these questions requires modeling the entire economy, not just the healthcare sector and the government. Tim brings a macroeconomic approach and his expertise to bear on these questions. The government's role in healthcare provision is at the forefront of our political debate. No jokes for that now, maybe later. And we're fortunate to have someone with Tim's expertise with us today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Timothy Kehoe.
Thank you, Kim. This can be emotional for me for a bit. Once I get into economics, I calm down, or I get excited, but in a different way. I'm really happy to be here today. Looking out, I see so many friends of Dave and family. I just want to mention a few of them right up front. Of course, Marilyn, Dave's wife, and his children, Paul and Melanie, and his brother and sister-in-law, Catherine and Warren. I could mention, well, wait a minute, this is a mixture. About half of you are family and friends of Dave. And the other half are young people. Dave would be excited about that. He's, as Kim mentioned, he's quite a mentor and promoter of young people. Now I'm overwhelmed. And I'm overwhelmed because of the honor of giving the third David K. Backus Memorial Lecture. But I'm much more overwhelmed by thinking about Dave, who is one of my closest friends in life, and he's my classmate and housemate in a dump of a house in 30 Winchester Avenue, one of the worst neighborhoods in New Haven. There are a lot of grad students lived on Mansfield Avenue, which was a block closer to Yale than us, and they'd always complain about the muggers and thieves. And we said, well, we don't worry about them because we live in the neighborhood with them. They can go from our neighborhood over there. Well, and I'm looking out there and I'm thinking some of you, now Dave's sister Lois can't be here with us today because she just moved to Seattle. She spent a year living with us when she finished at Holyoke and before she went off to Afghanistan in the Peace Corps. She was a real veteran. Dave's youngest sister, Ruth, came and spent a week with us when she was in high school. Sometimes I've heard her tell stories of me when she was 17, teaching her how to drink. I hope we're not, if we remember that stuff too much, I could go to jail even now, you know? And my brother Patrick, during the summer when he was still an undergrad, came and lived with us, and he already knew how to drink beer. But we played a lot of softball, and Dave and I tried to teach him economics. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Laura is a very good friend of mine. She never lived with us. No.
I did have to drink though.
No, okay, yeah. But you were kind of enough to invite me to your wedding in Pittsburgh when Dave and I were grad students. Okay. So all of you who knew us at the time are going to remember Dave and Tim's rule. Nothing in life that's good can't be better with a couple beers. Maybe before, after, during. That includes funerals, that includes economics lectures. Maybe you have to wait till after, but it can make it a bit better, huh? Okay, preparing for this, gosh, I got to get to my lecture. But preparing for this, I went through, and really it's the first time in 3 years, some of the emails that Dave and I shared in May and June of 2016. And I had all this woven into talk. My wife Jeannie told me, it's going to be too long, you'll be crying too much. And that's not what this event is. We've already done that. We've done crying events. But this is to remember Dave with joy. Okay. So let me just read a little piece. A couple of weeks after Dave died, I was in Toulouse at the meeting of Society for Economic Dynamics. And Dave was a very important member of that society. And I got up and I read a little memorial thing. I just want to do that for you now. This is just part of it. I posted news of Dave's death on my Facebook page during the night of Monday, 13 June 2016, the day after he died on the Sunday. More than 200 people commented. Most common comment was that Dave was one of the kindest, most generous people, maybe the nicest person in economics. At a memorial ceremony for Dave at NYU, immediately afterwards, I was especially touched by the words of Stan Zinn. Stan talked about what a big hole Dave's death had left in his life, but he concluded that the best we can do to remember Dave is to strive to be like him in his kindness, generosity, and helping others, students, colleagues, co-authors, to be the best they could. We can be honest and straightforward in our criticism, as Dave was, but we need to strive to be kind and generous as he was. I've tried to do that. I failed. But imagine what an ornery old dude I'd be if I hadn't at least tried. Okay, so I talked to Kim about what I should present. You know, we published a paper in the JPE last year with our friend Joe Steinberg that was really inspired by conversations that Kim and I had with Dave. And Kim said, no, that's old stuff. That's not what Kim would want. He'd want something new that you're excited about. So that's what I'm going to try to do. Kim already gave a great intro, so let me jump into it. Okay, U.S. old age dependency ratio. That is, the number of old people compared to working age people is going to increase. Main causes are drops in fertility, less young people, and increases in longevity. That's going to lead to higher government spending. How are we going to finance it? Well, we could cut benefits. We're not going to explore that much here. Or we could keep the programs, particularly Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid, in place. We have Social Security here. It turns out that's not as big a problem in the United States as it is in a bunch of European countries. And we're going to get results like other researchers have found. We're going to need big increases in taxes. But what I'm going to talk about here today is meant to make you a little bit more optimistic about the future. Because there's another big tendency that's going on in the US economy. The number of people with college education as a fraction of the adult population is increasing all the time. It turns out that's going to make people older. College-educated people, and this is robust to controlling for lots of other influences, but they know how to read and think a little bit better. Well, that's at least what we hope as college educators. They live longer, and they're healthier longer. So we're going to build that into the model, and what are we going to find? I'm going to get to that in a second. First, I notice I got to tell you a bit about the model. Don't worry. I have for you professional economists out there, you're saying to yourself, what the heck is Tim doing? He's a technical economist, and he's given us a lot of words. Yeah, I'm going to give you a lot of words and stories. I got the Bellman equations, though, and we're going to get to those in a minute. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to build a model of the economy, and you're just going to think to yourself when you hear about the detail that goes into that, wow, that takes one heck of a computer program to work with. Yeah, and it does. It sure does. And we've, in fact, the people at the Minnesota Supercomputer Laboratory were getting a bit sick of us because we took up all their space. But this is joint work with Juan Carlos Conesa. He's the guy from Stony Brook, who we were talking about. Two young guys, Vigard Nygaard, who just became an assistant professor at the University of Houston, and Gajan Ravindrathan, who's up in McMaster University outside Toronto. Well, turns out that Gajan has access to this giant Canadian supercomputer system, and so we're making even more progress. And I'll get to that in a minute. Okay. We're going to put all this into a model. We're going to look at balanced growth paths, which are relatively easy to compute and get ideas from. And then we're going to look at transition paths that just tells us what's going to happen over the next century. A couple caveats here. We're assuming that healthcare costs are not going to increase faster than the economy itself grows. That is not quite in line with the data. But you know, if healthcare costs keep increasing at the same rate that they've increased over the last 20 years, we're screwed. That's a technical term, but you know what I mean? So let's assume we can keep healthcare costs in line with economic growth, that they are going to be growing, but not by more than like 2% per year per capita. And I'm going to show you aging that other people have looked at is pretty scary, but not when we take into account that people are going to be more educated. And I'm going to show you why general equilibrium is important. There's a little fuss in economics of healthcare because it's dominated by applied microeconomists who don't like macroeconomists, and they certainly don't believe in general equilibrium. And they're wrong, we're right. Okay, but that's just a side thing. And then I'm going to show you how we have to do transition paths. And then we need serious computation of the sort that Juan Carlos was a student of mine at Minnesota as well, and he and Dirk Kruger did real pioneering work on this. But that was 20 years ago. And so that's why we need young guys like Gajin come and take over. Okay, so here's the result. And this is in line with what other people have come up with. If we keep other institutions constant and take into account college attainment, but keep that as a fraction of population constant, we're going to start needing to change the average tax on labor income from about 32%, as it is now for the average American, counting up all the labor taxes, including Social Security, payroll taxes paid by employers, and income taxes. That's going to have to increase to more than 44%. And as Kim alluded to, woof, that's tough because we're going to have fewer young people. They're going to have to work, and we're going to tax the heck out of them. And they won't want to work so much. So, you know, the situation could be dire. But if we take into account higher college education, that increase goes down from 12.4 to about 2.3%. It's not so bad. More and more college, that's good for us college teachers, can help save the US economy. Okay, and I'm going to talk about what's going to happen to asset prices. I'll talk briefly about the topic of whether US interest rates are determined in Beijing. No, they're not. What Chinese monetary policy determines is the US dollar yuan exchange rate. And this is something that Kim and I showed in this paper with Joe Steinberg, inspired by some of the stuff Dave got us thinking about. No, US interest rates are determined here, and they're going to be falling as the population ages. Okay, there's a literature on this. I put this up here. If there's any of you guys out there who contributed, congratulations. Let me just move on. Okay. So consumers are born. But in every period in the model, which is going to be every 2 years, they're hit by shocks. They're hit by shocks to their labor income, and they're hit by shocks to health, especially as they get older. as some of us are. Then they choose how much labor to supply, how much to consume, how much to save, and what to do in terms of health care. The government is going to provide Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and something we call emergency relief. Now, this model is going to be carefully calibrated to all kinds of micro data on consumer expenditures. And across states, these things can differ. And we're working on that. With the Affordable Health Care Act, some states bought into increased Medicaid provision, and some didn't. And that should have an impact. And we're working on that. We're not going to do that here because we're going to stop this thing right around 2010, the changes that we're putting in the healthcare system. So we're not looking at affordable, the Obamacare, as they call it. Remember, people didn't used to like that. And now we've decided we love it. Okay. It's the only political joke I'm going to make. Hey, Wolf, I was just down in Dallas. There you got to be careful. There's a lot more Republicans out there. And it's going to collect all kinds of taxes. Something interesting that we found, and Juan Carlos, you helped us find it, but it also indicated that you and Dirk and some of your collaborators made mistakes not including all this stuff back in your pension days. Turns out to get a lot of these effects, you need the full tax system in there. If you just think of what labor tax you need to increase healthcare provision when you have almost zero labor taxes, it's small, and it can be 10%. But the distortionary impact of that is not very high. When you're at 30% and you increase to 40, the impact of that in reducing labor supply is pretty brutal because you're getting closer to something kind of embarrassingly we economists call the top of the Laffer curve. Okay. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, try to figure it out and don't worry about the Laffer. Okay, let's just move on. Insurance, we're going to have employer-provided insurance, private healthcare insurance, and we're going to have firms in a very simple way. Every consumer is going to have a state variable. Every 2 years, they know what their age is. That just moves forward by 1 every period. Their education, which is locked in the current version of the model, somebody else must have chosen who got the education, like parents. And you lose the first period starting in when you're 20 is when you're going to start out. Before that, you live with your parents. And really, it's more like non-college educated people start between 18 and 20, and college educated people start between 22 and 24. But this current version, we don't look at that choice. We're just going to take trends into account. Depending on whether you're college educated or not, you have a profile of labor earnings. What's called the hump shape. It's especially hump-shaped for less educated people. You get more and more productive over time, and then as you get old, you get less productive. But we're going to have separate ones for college-educated people and non-college educated people, but they're going to get lots of shocks, including unemployment. As people get old, they're going to get Social Security, Medicare benefits. We haven't yet, our model is perfect for thinking about what happens when you move those back as people get older. And we're going to have to do that as a society, but that's not what we're focused on here. Health and age are going to determine medical expenditures and survival probabilities. Depend on age, education, and health. See, one of the health statuses we have is dead. And usually, before you're dead, you go through bad shape. Although that doesn't always happen, huh? But you guys want a picture, and I'll show you this in a while. One of the big things we did with microdata was estimate this giant Markov matrix that says what's the probability of tomorrow being 2 years older, of course, but high earnings, good health state, and so forth, given where we are today. Medicare is going to cover half of the medical expenses of consumers 65 and older. Last year I got a Medicare card. Not sure still what I got to do with it, but Jeannie told me I better sign up. Medicare and Medicaid is going to cover a lot of medical expenses, but you got to be poor. And there's conditions you got to meet. You know, we found in our other paper, in another paper we had worked on, that the idea of eliminating Medicare did not save that much money. It only saved 46 cents on the dollar that was saved just by reducing Medicare, because it had forced a lot of lower middle class and working class people in the United States into Medicaid. That kind of margin is kind of obvious, but people hadn't pointed it out enough. I already mentioned, we're mixing together data, at least at this point, from all kinds of different states. So we take averages to get this thing, we just reduce form, we call it emergency relief. That includes food stamps, emergency medical programs, all kinds of other stuff. That's just kind of an average. Government's going to consume, and it's going to have debt. Given Juan Carlos and I, as late as last summer, thought, introducing government debt in this model is not going to have a big impact. It actually does, because if interest rates are going down, the pressure on the government budget of increased debt is greatly reduced. And that's something that was kind of an education to us. And then the government's going to have a broad range of taxes. Right now, we just have a flat tax on labor income. We've done it with progressive taxes, like the US tax system. In some ways is, in some ways isn't. You got to get the details right. Social Security taxes are regressive, but doesn't impact the results that much. Let me get into a few details here. I've already mentioned this. We've looked at, our economy is going to grow per capita by 2% per year. That's the trend in the United States since about 1875. We've had a little bit of slowdown since the global recession of 2008, 2012. Let's hope that we're going to pick up again. I see my friend Finn Kidlin back there. I know he's more worried about this or pessimistic about this than I am, but maybe we can talk about that over beers later, right? That's what Dave said. Everything's better with the beer, including economics. So you got to be poor, and you can't have assets. Unfortunately, a lot of the people, and in our model, they're going to be responsible for a bunch of our results. They're going to be the non-college educated people. Something happens to them when they're older. The kind of insurance they have out there is, a lot of it is Medicaid.
have people making endogenous decisions to stay under the cap?
Yep.
Like that?
No, we're going to have, good, a big part of our result is driven by the following observation. So you did learn something from me and Dave. Okay. When we look at the data, we see that Medicaid collections, Medicare benefits to college-educated people are fairly low compared to non-college educated people. A lot is, of course, is income level, but that's correlated with the college education, but there even seems to be an extra effect. College-educated people don't like to have to go on Medicaid. It's not a pleasant thing to have to do, even the kind of hearings that you have to go through and so forth. What happens is the college-educated people save extra so that they're not going to have to be. Everybody's happy with Medicare, but college-educated people save extra so they don't have to go on Medicaid. And that would save the government a lot. Now, this needs more work, but you know, I'm not embarrassed about this, and Dave wouldn't be either. Because especially if I'm talking to a room filled with grad students, I'd say, hey, here's a weak point of our model. This would be something to work on. We don't really have the employer provided medical insurance figured out that well. There's all kinds of tax benefits that we're not taking into account. There's all kinds of benefits in how what we call the pools are formed, and we don't really do that. We just have some people are stamped at birth. Remember, and to us, birth is 20 years old, with getting employer-paid medical insurance. And disproportionately, those are people with college education, too. And then they're going to have that their whole lives. It turns out, and this shouldn't surprise you, if you remember all the big healthcare debates 2 years ago, the young people who have employer-provided healthcare would rather not have it. They'd rather have the higher wage because they don't think they're going to get sick, and it just seems like a better deal to them. But the employers like to have them in the pool because it makes the overall cost low. Those are fascinating issues that we haven't fully dealt with here. Well, we haven't dealt with them at all. We just kind of, that's what we economists do. You come across some part of your model that's really difficult to do and not at what you think is the center of what you're doing, and you just make an assumption. Dave was great at that. I don't think I'm that bad either. Okay, and then we're going to have private health insurance, and we're going to assume that that's actuarially fair. And we know it's actually not in the United States. But once again, we're just moving beyond that. So, young consumers who don't have the employer insurance choose or not to buy private health insurance. A lot of them don't do it, and that's something we see in the data. In fact, you even see that with highly educated people nowadays, because you'll find, especially in the high-tech sector, people want to join startups, and they'll even tell their parents, they say, well, look, I'm not getting a high salary, but I have benefit in getting in on the bottom floor here. I'm getting stock options. Health insurance, hey, I'm healthy. And, you know, can I stay on yours? Can we look into that? I mean, some of you people at the age, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, older consumers all benefit from Medicare, and they can also get private health insurance on the side. Consumers who are just overwhelmed by medical expenses just go on first Medicaid and then what we call emergency relief. We're going to have everybody, okay, model's very simple here. We're going to have everybody who is in a certain bad health status get provided the same care. And we know there's differences in care level. What's kind of shocking, and public health care public health economists find this. Sometimes the expensive health care doesn't improve your survival probabilities. That's complex to work with. VGuard is working with our partners at thank God Kim already mentioned all these things. I would have forgot. A lot of this is a big project with the Harvard School of Public Health, led by my good friend David Canning. Okay. Oh yeah. All right. So all of this has been a lot of words. Thank God now we economists can see just what's going on here. I already told you guys, this is for a young consumer. The state of the consumer is age, education, health status, stochastic labor productivity. That's just the up and down thing. The amount of assets that they've chosen, and the health plan they came into the period with. They'll go out of the period maybe with the same health plan, or maybe they'll switch, and that's one of their choices. Okay? That's what they're choosing. They're going to choose consumption, asset holdings, labor, and health care plan to go out with. They maximize the utility over consumption and leisure, and then they look forward to the future. They have all these Markov processes. Those are the big cues. They're going to tell them where they're going to be in the next period, and a bunch of that's stochastic. They have a budget constraint with all kinds of taxes and things that complicate it depending on whether they're sick, whether they have to do co-pays and so forth. And they pay taxes, consumption taxes, labor taxes, and capital income taxes. I had to put that in here. You economists wouldn't have understood it otherwise.
So you're taking the healthcare status as doing its own thing.
Yep.
You're just worried about the insurance component, not feedback between money put in and your health.
No, that's right. That's because David Canning told us that to first order, the public health guys can't even decide if it has a big impact. Now, VGuard and Canning and some of his people are doing a paper on this. The NIH, that put in a lot of money to help us pull this thing together, is really looking for more evidence that actually healthcare does improve health outcomes. We're wringing the data as hard as we can.
So that's a requirement for renewal of the money? To find out.
Yes. So, hey, you've learned a lot of stuff since that summer in New Haven. All right, now that the economists understand where I am, I can get back to just words. So one thing is longevity. And the UN has a lot of these projections for different countries. They're interesting. They have high projections, low projections, medium projections. We're doing the medium projection. They're interesting to look at. You know, they're going to tell you the country with the biggest population in the world in 2060 is going to be Nigeria, not China. China's going to shrink. Nigeria's going to keep growing. Anyway, we looked at the US and we worked things out. Survival probabilities, in order to get these much older people that they're projecting, there's not much room Is this good news for us or bad news for us? There's not much room to have 40-year-olds survive to be 42-year-olds. Most of them are going to do it anyway. It has to be up there like, you know what I mean? People like my dad, who lived to be 86. See what I mean? We're going to have to live a lot longer.
Live a lot longer to what? Be consistent with population projections?
Yeah. And there's micro stuff on this. It's what they call compression. It's a horrible sounding term, but it's out there. It's just whether it's stalled or not is the big debate among the health economists and the medical practitioners. Something called compression of morbidity. And it's more like telling you things like 80 is the new 70. And they say stuff like that to you. And it means that if you're going to be 80 in the near future, you're going to be as healthy as the average 70-year-old person was a few years ago. That's kind of good. I'm hoping that. And we look at projections, and this could be optimistic, but between 1980 and 2005, about 23% of American adults finished a university education. And looking at different projections, I tell you, when this paper went to a journal, some of the referees said, oh, those projections they're doing are ridiculous. But then the editor, this guy Mike Keene, he wrote back and said, ignore that. Your projections match up exactly with mine. So, okay, fine. fine. I'm just mentioning this is a little bit problematical thing, but let's just see how far we get with it. We're going to say that by the year 2010, 2/3 of Americans are going to have college educations. Makes you more productive, and it improves your health outcomes. Come on, and we know that. College-educated people, for better or worse, smoke less, all kinds of less obesity, and we don't understand all those things. But it's in the data, and you'd say, oh no, it's just because they're richer. No, control for that. Run these regressions and all that stuff that these guys do. Don't look at me so funny, Tom. I mean, do the best you can, and there really seems to be this education component to better health outcomes. So we're going to stick that in. Okay, I've already told you all this stuff. First, I'm going to do balanced growth paths. These are funny graphs. We just thought we needed graphs. I want you to look at 0 and 10, but we even were saying to the referees for the paper, look, if you think that the increase in college education is only half as much as we said, that's going to be the 0.5 here.
I see.
Old age dependency, that comes from longevity. Of course, some of it comes from fertility. There's less young people. And some of it comes because college-educated people live longer. But that's not the action. That's longevity. Whew, picture's going to change. How much capital do we have out there? How much saving do we have out there? And that's going to drive things like wage rates and interest rates and so forth.
Clarifying question?
Yeah.
So when it says fraction of the projection, are you taking, what are you changing?
We're going to say...
Are there 3 projections behind it? Or?
No, we a whole grid of projections. We're going to take all those things saying, how much longer are you going to live?
Just longevity only.
Longevity, and then we're going to take a grid on it saying if The average life expectancy of a college-educated person is going to go from 82 years to 95 years.
Yeah.
Let me just do that in steps, so in case you don't believe it. But Patrick, I want you to focus on 0, what would have had happen with no changes, and 1,
The full projection.
our projection.
What are you saying about labor supply with respect to age?
Old people, and we built this in. Tom, I don't have this picture here. Old people stop working a lot. We don't make them stop working, but in the data they work a lot less. So we put a fudge factor in there that said 70-year-olds don't like to work as much as 60-year-olds. I love doing what I call work, so I don't quite understand that. But Jeannie might say that's because that's what I call work. Not everybody else does. They call what I do having fun. That's a good thing about being a professor.
Jim, what are you assuming about the cost of a college education?
We don't. This is what I was trying to mention. The version we're sending back to the journal is going to have that in it. So when I talk about welfare numbers, this thing of having, I've already mentioned, we do have worked in now that a big cost to college education is you don't start earning income until you're about 4 years older. Okay, that's a big cost. But then, people who are NYU students, well, undergrads, but you guys are probably grad students, don't have to worry, but it costs a fortune. Yeah, we don't have that in this version. I think we're going to put something, right, Juan Carlos, aren't we putting in, they wanted us to stick it in. Here I don't have those results yet. No, that's a really good point. Because it's so good to have more college-educated people, but it's costly. So, of course, our results are going to be, because we're going to talk about how good it is and not how costly it is.
But are you worried your results?
Maybe you were the referee.
Are you worried your results on college are a little bit overly optimistic? It looks like you have like no underlying types. You don't have like inherently super talented, college ready, not so talented, some super untalented. It looks like you have everyone being the same, and you're just mechanically taking how well the college do and pretending if you went and educated everybody, somehow they'd all end up the same. Even though if you actually did that, there might be a whole bunch of people who went to college, they won't get a lot out of it. Does that make your thing a little bit
100%
overly
right.
optimistic?
Juan Carlos, are you taking notes on all this?
Right, like on the margin, you're dipping into a different pool as you keep, when you're going down to the last 10% of people right now, in terms of, how well they did in high school, it's not obvious that the
Come
college is going
on,
to triple
you've been a college educator for 30-some years.
12. 12.
Oh yeah, you're my much younger brother. No, don't you believe we transform people's lives?
In proportions that are underlying talent, unfortunately.
Okay. Tom?
Cross-section, in Korea right now, about 85% of people graduate from college. So you got some observations.
I see.
No, that's good.
I see.
Juan Carlos thinks he's going to remember all this.
It bears on this young.
Yeah.
With emphasis on you.
No, that's right. That's right. That's right. No, because when I presented it, there's benefits of more college education, but there's costs. We better get the costs in there. And the projections, but Mike Keene, and he's the editor in charge of our paper, said our projections were fine with him, because he has a paper that says that. However, no, this is the tough thing. And so Tom's saying the college education's way up. Believe it or not, I'm actually on schedule here. Okay. Lot more savings. And what the old people who are going to live longer, just on their own, save more because they know they're going to live to be older. So they better save more. But college-educated people save especially more so that they don't have to go on Medicaid. We have a utility cost of going on Medicaid that's common in the literature. It's really unpleasant to apply for Medicaid. That's a shame for the United States, but we have to put that in. People don't want to do it. If you don't have high enough income, you just say, screw it. If I'm really sick when I'm old, I'm going to have to go Medicaid. But college educated people say, I'm going to save my way out of that, and I'm going to have Medicare and good private health at the same time. Wages are going to go up because of college attainment makes people more productive, and because we have a bigger capital stock because people are saving more. That's going to make interest rates go down. That would have happened even without the college attainment because more people are saving for retirement. But yeah. Government spending, public health spending goes up with all of our sources of aging except college attainment. Social Security spending goes up because college-educated guys get higher Social Security benefits and they live longer. They get more Medicare, but they take much less Medicaid, and that's where the action is here. And this is what, I remember we had a meeting, Juan Carlos and I, with Vigard and Gadjin, and they were saying, we should put government debt in there. We said, why do that? That's not going to have any impact. Remember that? They were right and we were wrong. It turns out big portion of the federal budget is dedicated to servicing the debt. If you have much lower interest rates, of course you say, how can they get lower than they are now? But at least they'll stay low. A lot of these changes, this is what some macroeconomic researchers call the new normal, the low interest rates, and it's driven by aging, not by China. What does Larry Summers call it? I don't want to teach these guys bad words. Secular stagnation.
But you're staying well away from the Samuelson case, where.
Oh yeah.
But it's still getting closer, so it's cheaper and cheaper.
And for people interested in finance here, we're having like what we call our interest rate starts out being like 4%, and then it might be going down to 2%. That is because we have one asset. Government bonds and capital pay the same rate of return. We would need a model where we could make sense of the low return on government bonds compared to high return on capital.
I see.
Kim told me this talk would be good for finance guys, but now they're thinking, whoa, that's a pretty drastic assumption. But hey, if you're a young guy, this is showing how important it is to figure that thing out, different rates of returns on different assets. Okay? Here's the big thing, and we've already talked about that. If you put in longevity and fertility increases, you get big increases. You add those things together, and you get over 44% marginal labor tax at the end. Okay.
Wait, where are you getting the fertility increases from?
Oh, not enough young guys.
No, I'm confused. I thought if you're going to just hit patterns in the data, I thought richer you get, fewer kids. Look at all of Europe and stuff.
Here's what happens. Remember the story, and it's to scare young people. You say, see all those old guys out there? They're going to want to have there, and the people keep mentioning Social Security. Social Security is not the big deal here. In some European countries, of course it is. In the United States, it's not. We can finance Social Security. Medicare and Medicaid are something else. See those old guys? They're going to want their entitlement benefits. Who's going to pay for them? Is there a Social Security lockbox? Is all the money put aside? No, of course it's not. Young guys are going to have to pay taxes. And the fewer young guys there are out there, the more we're going to have to tax them, the less they're going to work, and then the more we're going to have to tax them on top of that. Okay. Put all these things together.
Can you just back on the
Yeah.
one before? So what you were saying, not the one before?
The graph from.
Go back one slide.
Oh, yeah.
So just what it means, if I do blue plus red, I get plus 14% taxes.
Right.
And if I do black, I get minus 10.
Exactly. And then you take, exactly, and you take the,
If you do what? To do blue plus red, I get plus 14.
yes,
Black does minus 10, so the net is plus 4.
exactly.
That's what I mean.
No, exactly right. Thank you. No, Patrick, these are each one separately.
Why the fertility? What are you graphing? You're graphing. It's not science.
If we had a model with only,
It's the tax rate associated with,
if it was only fertility,
and if you do a higher decline, higher taxes, that's what the red means.
right.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's each thing separately. These maybe aren't the best things. 2 minutes. Blasting through.
Right on time, right on time.
All right, wait a minute, wait a minute. Welfare. Welfare. This takes out the 2% per year that's already there. Come on, people in 100 years, hopefully you're going to be a lot better off than us just because of economic growth. Well, I was just talking about this at a conference in Dallas, and we were talking a lot about Mexico. You know, I really admired the young woman from Sweden who went and talked to the United Nations about, I'm nervous about climate change too. But she said, why is anyone worried about growth? Go find a young person from Mexico, from China, from India. See if they're worried about growth. Okay, climate change we've got to do something about, but whatever. I am, no, we do. But we're going to be a lot, I mean, my view is we're going to be a lot better off in 100 years, just like we're a lot better off than my great-grandparents were, okay? So we're taking that into account, but we're even going to be better off than we thought. And you know why? You know why? And we put this in there the way the literature does. Everybody, including the non-college educated people, are going to live longer. And you compute value of life, and you're getting extra kicks.
I have a question.
Yes.
If they're living longer and you can't find any effect of spending money on health on outcomes, that's just like mechanically built into the world?
Yeah.
If the world goes longer, you live longer regardless if you spend more on health?
Patrick, I think the model has all of that in it. We just don't have it endogenous. This compression of morbidity, increased lifespans come from better health things. It's just when they look at what we Americans spend extra money on, it doesn't seem to necessarily improve stuff.
There might be world progress on health that's going with time, and it's not connected to, at a given point in time, if you spend 10 times as much as me, it's not like it pushes out to frontier.
No, that's exactly right.
The whole frontier goes.
That's exactly right. So here, I'm gonna end this by just answering Patrick's question with something else I wanted to talk about and pretend it's an answer. You know, I spend a lot of time in Mexico and Brazil. And looking at the data, one thing that we're finding there is that when you look at health outcomes, measure of how healthy people are, what their life expectancies are, those countries are 20 years behind the United States. I mean, that is, there is Brazil, the life expectancy, health outcomes, infant mortality is the kind of thing that we had 20, maybe 25 years ago. If you look at their GDP numbers, they're 70 years behind us. There is something about increased knowledge of how important sanitation is, a clean water supply, basic antibiotics, that seems to be transferable even to very poor countries. And so maybe our indices of how well Brazil and Mexico are doing, we have to adjust it for those health outcomes. People are happy to live an extra 20 years. And that's in some of these numbers. And with that, I'm going to thank you for listening. And I'm hoping Dave would have been happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you all for being here. So now I'm going to ask you, as Dave would, to compress morbidity with us down in the Gardner Commons, which you're going to go out this door, turn right briefly, go right down the steps, and turn left. It's only about 20 feet away. So please join us for refreshments, and we'll see you downstairs. You can't get lost. Or wine, in this case.